Thanks everyone for joining us for the Dairy Breakfast. My name's Ken Garner. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and the lands in which we are meeting around New South Wales and Australia, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So this morning we are going to be focusing sort of on recovery and recovery resources and actions, and from the recent floods on the Hunter and Mid-North Coast. Going to start with the Rural Assistance Authority talking to us about the natural disaster recovery grants, and we have three speakers from the Rural Assistance Authority, the RAA: Carlie Darling, Simon Provost and Jared Dillon. We'll keep questions to the end, so if you can, or you can put questions into the chat, and then hopefully after that we might be able to have a short discussion about the recovery process as well, with the recovery committees. So I'll hand over now to Carlie and we'll get straight into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Simon, do you want to? Thank you. So thank you very much for having us today. We're very keen to spread as much information to make these events as accessible as possible for people who are applying for them. We have two main events open at the moment, which can make life a little bit confusing. So we're here today to clarify what assistance is available across these events, how to apply for the assistance, what the eligibility criteria are, and how to get those payment information processed smoothly. So on the 3rd of June 2025, assistance was made available for two events. One is the AGRN 1212, which is the East Coast Severe Weather event, which is the flooding from 18th of May. And then on the 3rd of March, we had the Tropical Cyclone Alfred Severe Weather event. So that's AGRN 1198. And they both opened at the same time, even though obviously one happened a lot earlier than the other. And so we have the two programs of assistance open, and I'll hand over to Simon to help talk through how to apply and some of the eligibility criteria for those programs.
Thanks, Carlie. Thanks, everyone. As Carlie indicated, we have the Natural Disaster Relief Grant, which is the $25,000 grant, and it's covering both 1198 and 1212. So for impacts for either of those events, when you're in an LGA that's eligible, you can apply for the 25,000. You can't apply for both 1198 and 1212. You can only apply for one. And when you apply for the 1212, invoices would start from the 18th of May when the event occurred. And if you applied for the 1198, you're saying that your damages occurred during the tropical cyclone. We would probably say that the majority, there's about 19 crossover LGAs in that 1198 and 1212 scenario. If you're only impacted by 1198 and you're in an LGA that has only got that one event, you can still apply for the 25,000, but from the 3rd of March. With this $25,000 grant, we have an initial $5,000 upfront payment, which is paid once evidence is provided and you've been approved according to the guidelines. This time we're requesting photo evidence of damage, 1 to 5 photos to show the impact as clearly as you can, so we can see the damage on your property. As per all previous grants that you may have dealt with before, the same criteria apply. You have to meet the guidelines as a primary producer or an aquaculture producer, and evidence that information through the guidelines, which is no different to any previous event you may have dealt with. Importantly, the applications close on 4 p.m. on the 4th of December, which is 6 months from when we opened, and then you get a further 6 months on top of that to have all your claims in by. So that's through till June 2026. One of the key changes we've had from the previous event, which you probably would have dealt with, potentially the Feb 22 event or the ones at the end of 2022, we do have a hurdle of $20,000 gross income for the primary production during a financial year. So that wasn't in the AGRN previous ones like the SDAs. So we need evidence to show that you do have a minimum of 20,000 gross income from your primary production in a financial year, as well as the 50% hurdle, which is standard across all our programs. There's not too much different under that. I just want to make sure that you do identify which event you're applying for and which LGA you're in, and make sure that you're applying for the correct one. And as Carlie said, there's two combined, so you can't apply for both. It's just one 25,000 that covers both of the events. The second grant that was opened as well is a special rural landholders grant for $10,000, and this is only for the 12-12 event. So the LGAs that were affected with the flooding and the East Coast low, they have the opportunity to apply for a $10,000 grant with no upfront payment. This doesn't extend up until the 11/98, so it will only be invoices from the 18th of May and that were affected by the flooding event. The same open date for that as the other grant, and it will close on the 4th of December this year, but you still do have another 6 months after that through to June 2026 to apply. Importantly, with that one, there is one change from the previous RLG rural landholder grant that we've offered before, and that's the cap on $250,000 in combined off-farm income for the applicants. So that was not set up in that structure previously, so it's slightly different. But if you do have any questions or any of your friends or colleagues that are applying, the best thing is to read the guidelines and contact RA if you have any questions via email or giving us a call on the 1-800 number. The 20,000 still applies.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rush to get out of the house today.
I'll hand over to Jared just to give you a bit of a run through the eligible expenses criteria.
If I could just get people to mute in the background, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So the eligibility as far as expenses that are able to be claimed under both the grants is the same for the rural landholder and the National Disaster Relief Grant. This includes, but it's not limited to, so infrastructure, repairs and replacement, cleanup activities and debris and waste removal, restoration of agricultural land, replacement of lost crops, plants or livestock, assistance for injured animals, and purchasing and transporting fodder and feed. So similar to previous grants that we've delivered, however, there is some differences in there. Probably the main thing to call out is additional evidencing requirements that you may be requested to provide with the submission of your claim. So I'd encourage everybody to have a read through the program guidelines. For both events, there is an eligibility table in those guidelines which breaks down all the individual eligible expenses and in line with additional evidence that you may be requested to support your claim. Another thing I'd like to just call out for as far as the claims and processing of invoices is concerned, within the RAA we have also had some system upgrades to assist with the processing. So with the submission process of your invoices, you now will also receive an email upon submission confirming the invoices that have been submitted. And then once your claim has been processed, you'll receive a second email which advises which invoices have been processed, the amount that you can expect the next payment date, and also any invoices that may have been excluded, whether sufficient evidence was not provided or if they're just not eligible for claiming. So a great improvement for us and for the clients as well, just to be able to keep track of invoices that you've submitted, and it'll show a bit of a running balance of where you're up to as far as how much you've claimed to date and how much you've got left to claim on that grant.
Sorry, just taking myself off mute. Thanks, Jared. So a common question that we're getting is what is driving some of the changes that you're seeing in the guidelines between the last time you applied for assistance and this particular event? And there's a couple of things that have resulted in these changes. One is that for the very first time in a long time, we had a break between events. So before that, and I'm sure I don't need to tell the people on the call, there was a series of very severe events back to back. Where we kept the same rules and guidelines to make it very easy for people to apply. Since that time, there's been a thorough review of policies and processes, including an independent audit of the way that these programs are run. And recommendations from that audit included lowering upfront payments to reduce the risk of fraudulent applications and also to increase the evidence requirements. Now, this is something that Simon will talk about in more detail in a minute, but probably the other contextual piece that would be quite important for you to understand is that because Cyclone Alfred was a cross-border event, the Prime Minister was very clear that he wanted the guidelines across Queensland and New South Wales to be very closely aligned. And the decisions made by Queensland and how they assess applications have been carried over into New South Wales for the first time. They have been doing it that way for quite some time. So we have adopted a number of the approaches of assessments and how we make payments and introduced them for this event. But I'll hand over to Simon to explain that in more detail.
Thanks, Carlie. Yeah, as Carlie alluded to, one of the main changes we've had from previous events is the evidence of direct damage, which I talked about a bit earlier about photographs being provided, 1 to 5. The key to this evidence requirement is to show clearly the damage that's occurred on the property in a sense that can be understood and viewed, considering we don't have a person on the ground. So what we want to see is direct damage, and that's the key thing behind it. We don't need photos of, like we said there, a tree fall. No, we want to see, if you're saying you've got fences knocked out, show us a photo of your fences knocked out, or the damage to your crops that are being inundated with water or damaged. So we need to have that on file, and we need to see that. So the assessment officers will, as part of your application, will review those photos. They may ask some questions, and that's just to get clarity around this. It's obviously the first time we've used photo evidence in this manner, but we've put these tips and so forth up there on the website so you can see the sample types of photos we're looking for. We don't believe it's overly onerous. It's sometimes people haven't got photos during the event. We understand there is stress, high stress environments, and taking a photo is not key to that. But even after, during your cleanup, you can show and show water lines and show us where it is on your property. So it is a common sense rule that we're looking to and establish that the damage is on your property and that it is what you're saying it is in your declarations for application. The second thing that's changed is the requirement for us to review insurance documentation, which is in line with what Carlie said with Queensland. What we want to see is you may have insurance, but it may not cover the flood damage. So we need to see that, and just we're trying to ensure that we're not having people double dip on insurance claims and then claiming taxpayer funded grants for the same things. So there's no problem with having insurance, and if you're using your insurance to claim for certain items, bigger items, infrastructure, that's fine. You may want to cover things that you need that are eligible items through the grant, so fodder and so forth, or crop replacements that may not be covered. We just want to see evidence in your insurance that we're not double dipping. And look, we can see that in any way. You can provide the full claim, and we can sort of have a look at it and talk you through that and help you. And as I said, it's the first time we've been reviewing the insurance as part of grant, so we'll definitely be working with all our clients to help them understand and make it as easy as possible for you. The other thing we just wanted to touch on is that the other Cat B stuff is still available for you all, which is the natural disaster relief loans up to 130,000. The transport subsidies, which I know you all know very well, are still available and work concurrently with this, and the donated fodder. So we have those running at the same time with our team. We also have the RLG operating on the $10,000 and the $25,000 grant operating all at the same time. So yeah, if you have any questions on what you've got owing or where you're up to, you can always send us an email or call our 1-800 number to discuss your grants that you have or loans. Carlie?
Thanks, Simon. So probably the other most popular question that we're getting or inquiry through our phone line and through emails is what additional financial assistance is going to be available. I want to clarify that, there's definitely the acknowledgement that this is sort of the first step in urgent and immediate support, and there are discussions being had around what additional supports could be provided. Probably one of the things that's most helpful for me to share with you is not a decision that's made by the RAA. We definitely use the data that we have and customer data from past events, as well as your indications of levels of damage to help feed into data, but it's ultimately determined by the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, and they determine that with the Commonwealth. And so once they've made that determination, they will let us know to make more assistance available. And what we focus on is getting that out the door to you as quickly as possible and making it available to you. So probably the best thing you can do is to keep an eye on our social media pages. We would update first on Facebook to let people know that more money has been made available. And also, as soon as it's announced, we will have it stood up as quickly as possible for applications on our website. So if anyone's wondering how they'd know if additional assistance would be made available, that's the process and that's how you'll find out.
I suppose just lastly too, noting that there has been, quite a few changes and updates to the guidelines and the requirements since the last round of disaster recovery grants that were available from RAA. We've developed some new customer resources just to help better understand the requirements and application process. So it's a lot of great tools which can be located on our website. So 3 examples here. We've got, there's a document, the application tips. So it's a dedicated web page, and there's also a PDF you can download there that just runs through what you're sort of required for the application. So I definitely would recommend having a look at that before submitting your application. It just outlines everything that you'll need and what's required. There's also an example application document on there. So you can have a browse through that and see potentially what the application will look like and just what we're expecting in some of the fields, if there's any questions that you might be unsure of. And then lastly, on our website, there's a separate, once you navigate to the grants page, you can either click on the Rural Landholders grant page or the National Disaster grant page. Each grant has a specific tab for frequently asked questions. So there's quite a lot of questions in there about eligibility and if specific items might be considered eligible for claiming. So really great resource on there to have a bit of a browse through. But as always too, if there's any further questions regarding application, eligibility, claiming, anything like that, please feel free to contact us on the 1-800 number just through our admin team. Happy to assist with anything we can there, and that number can just be located on our website as well.
So that probably brings us to the end. Does anyone have any questions for us?
Well, while people are thinking about it, Carlie, just a question I had is, there's the 2 events, the cyclone and the mid-coast event. How does, if you're a bit impacted by both, how do you know which one you should claim for?
That's a great question. Thank you, Ken. I think it depends on your individual circumstances. So if you've already expended, $25,000 in the cleanup for Cyclone Alfred, jump on and claim it now, and you'll be able to get your full $25,000 back very quickly. If you have been impacted by Cyclone Alfred, but also the East Coast flooding event, and you think that you probably won't expend the full amount for Alfred, but you would for the East Coast floods, then you'd go for the flooding event. I think you sort of need to look at what costs you've incurred already, and whether you think you'll expend the full amount in the timelines. So probably go and jump on the website and have a look at the claims dates, work out where you can get the most bang for buck to make sure that you can get as many of your expenses recouped as possible.
Thanks, Carlie. Does anyone else have a question?
I was just wondering, there's laneways and that on, like, for dairy cows and that got destroyed in the constant wet. They basically just took all the gravel away, turned it into mush. Is like gravel and that for resurfacing laneways available in this grant?
Simon, I'll hand over to you for that one.
Jared's the expert on this one.
Oh, I can get one. Yeah, no, look, that definitely would be considered eligible. Like, we're looking at expenses that relate to direct damage caused by the event. So the constant wet definitely constitutes, obviously having the cows travel through there, depleting the gravel, it would be eligible. The only thing I would say, just with the new evidencing requirement, is we may just request some photos to just sustain the damage to be submitted along with your invoice for the gravel that you're claiming.
Yep.
Yep, Ken.
Yep.
A couple of questions. Sorry, Paul Van Well from Dairy New South Wales. Thanks for organising this for us, guys. A lot of people we're talking to and working with at the moment, look, it's fair to say they've got a lot on their plate. And quite a number are extremely exhausted, and I appreciate absolutely respect the need for due diligence, with taxpayers' funds, and the need for higher hurdles and things like that. I also just don't think that there's a number of people that are in the right mental state and capacity time-wise to meet those extra hurdles, and even to meet some of the original ones probably. Just wondering, what there is. I know there's, while there's access to examples on pages and websites, I've got people that are not able to access their own home at the moment and things like that. There's limited internet. What support is there in actual helping people actually complete these forms? Is that something that's available? The original guidelines said contact the RFC. I'm just not sure that that's quite a practical solution at present. Or is it RAA? Just wondering how we can.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And certainly understand that there's many people who don't have access to their homes and they are very distressed. So what we would recommend there is actually the rural financial counsellors are our main avenue of on-the-ground support. However, in areas where there's been a concentration of people impacted, they will be quite overwhelmed as well. So the other thing that you can do is you can just call our 1-800 number and staff will talk you through on the phone how to submit your application. So if there are any questions about what you need, we can walk you through, go and grab these 5 things. When you've got those, come back and then call again, and then we'll tell you what to do next. So we can break it down into a sort of like piecemeal approach and just make it digestible. And that is why we have the 6-month period for application. So, if you don't need that urgent and immediate access to assistance, or you don't have the time to do that for the initial $5,000, take your time, check the documents you need, gather that over the 6 months, and then just do it all in one hit is probably my advice. I think you might be on mute, Paul, or I've lost your voice anyway.
Sarah, I think it's probably looking to put in the entire claim that and to get that resolved, and certainly cash flow is an immediate issue. Any sense of time frame on payments?
Look, actually, probably the biggest hurdle we're facing at the moment is incomplete applications. It doesn't take that long for us to assess and make a payment once it comes in, but you don't get in the queue until it's complete. So a lot of people think, oh, I'll start it, that will get me in the queue. That's not how it works. We can only pick up the claims that are complete. So that's probably the other thing I'd say is take the time to gather the evidence and get it right, and try and do it all in one hit. Otherwise, you've got to keep going back and back and back. But for some people, that works, doing the little bits at a time and working their way through it because they've got 10 minutes here and there. Other people would rather just do it once and have it over with. So it just depends on the producer.
So once they've completed it, do you have a sense of approximately what the time frame for payment would be?
Simon?
So obviously, once we have a complete application, we have to assess based on order of entry. So we just work our way through there. So generally, it only takes a few days once we've done it through the process. And then once approved, you'd receive an approval notification, then be paid in approximately 10 business days after that. It fluctuates depending on the number of claims we're doing in a period. So it really comes down to that completed application. And obviously, like I said, there are a couple of extra hurdles in there with insurance and photos, which does cause a little extra to do than what probably most are used to. But getting that in, getting it done, once we have it, it's a pretty quick turnaround that we've noticed. So yeah, it's only a few days, but it's getting all that documentation lined up, I understand, takes the time.
Carlie, you got it?
Trevor.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Carlie, this Gloucester Rotary Club got a champion job of getting Mitch Parker here from Reconstructing New South Wales, and there's a few questions that have come out in our region regarding the possibility of Cat D getting up, and if you apply for Cat C, are you going to be eligible for Cat D if it does get up to, Mitch has been, on an individual basis, been on our farm, has done a champion job of going through the region, but that's a concern from some people. You might be able to put some clarity around that.
Yes, absolutely. And I bring you probably great comfort there, Trevor. So if a Category D is declared, it won't matter if you've applied for a Category C or not, you'll be eligible for the amount.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you've already applied and had payments made under a Category C, we will have to make special arrangements so that you don't get both amounts. But our team will manage that for you. You won't have to do anything.
Andrew Allen here. I've just got a question re insurance. This time you're asking for insurance policies. I note on the application there's an ability to tick no. So a lot of the clients that I probably deal with, the 25,000 will only probably cover one load of hay to purchase for fodder. So I'm wondering whether where we tick no there, because let's face it, flood insurance is astronomical. I don't know any farmer that's got flood insurance, for example. If they were to claim fodder, a load of hay on a truck, would that be sufficient, or will you be then asking them for insurance on that at a later date?
Andrew,
sorry. Oh, no, you go. You go,
Simon. Yes, so Andrew, obviously we want to find out whether you have insurance. So a lot of applicants, I can tell you, out of the hundreds we've had already, they will say no, I don't have it, but they will then note underneath there's a field there for reasons why. It'll say my insurance doesn't cover it. Even though that's true, we still need to see the evidence of the insurance. And sometimes people just say no, flat out, I don't have any insurance, and that's how we have to go. And there is a trust level in there that people are declaring that they don't have insurance, but we still need to see the document. And if you do have it, provide it to us. I know a lot of them say, yeah, flood's not covered, or pasture restoration or fodder's not covered. That's obvious, but we're required as administering in this on behalf of those guidelines, we have to ask for that documentation and view it, unfortunately, in that scenario. And it's just purely what we have to do. And we're well aware that the insurance wouldn't cover that stuff, so you could still claim it, but we need to view it.
Okay. And the primary impact date, what importance has that got when we're looking at an event? Because that's confused a lot of people as well. Is it when the impact started, when it was at its highest? What's the purpose and scope of that question?
And it says from a specific date onwards. So if it was the 1198 tropical cyclone, it was declared that that started on the 3rd of March. So any invoices or any damage incurred that you can evidence from the 3rd of March onwards, and tie that back and evidence that it was a result of that event, you can claim for that. With the flood, it was determined that the flood event was on the 18th of May. So any invoice or any damage has to come from that date onwards into the future. So your clean-up duties and everything, but you can't, if you apply for a 12/12 that was the event was the 18th of May, you can't then claim for invoices prior to that. So you couldn't submit invoices on that.
Yeah, so the primary date
Is the event.
Effect. It's just the event. Okay.
Yep.
Because some people think, okay, when was the primary date I was impacted as opposed to that? I suppose I wonder why we got the question.
Yeah, we have had that. It is a relevant question, Andrew, because in the previous flooding events in 22, the flood would move downstream and impact people later than the original. So we had questions on it. I was impacted 2 months. The water didn't get to me to this time. So it did. It all came out of the last 5 or 6 years, as we know. Yeah.
Yeah, with the rural landholder grant, if someone hasn't turned over 25 grand, you're allowing a retrospective back to 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 20,000. Yeah, back 5 years. We'll look at. So yeah, it is the confusion and feedback we got from Tari as well from our guys there the other week was, yeah, people thought I'm a rural landholder, so I'm eligible, but it's a rural landholder that is conducting a primary production enterprise, and we base the 20,000 as the key indicator to say you are operating a primary production enterprise if you're doing 20,000 gross primary production income as declared on your tax return. Anything below that, you wouldn't be eligible.
Yeah, but you can submit tax returns that are older than the most recent for that.
Absolutely, back to 2021.
Is that the same for the rule for the 20 grand turnover for the flood grant as well?
Yes, yep, they're both the same.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Just in the case of people that are share farmers and the like, so where they may or may not have a lease agreement in place. Sometimes these are less documented than we would like, but they
Yes.
clearly have a business that they're a dairy business, for example, that they can demonstrate and how do you guys kind of manage that in terms of, you may get a claim from the landowner potentially, but you may get a claim from the dairy business that operates, and they could be for two very different sorts of damage.
Yeah, Paul, we've seen those over the last 5 years. That's quite a common occurrence across all industries. What we want to do is evidence and see who's operating where. So we understand that sometimes it's not formal lease agreements in place. There's no problem. We just need to be able to establish what that is and how it functions and who's responsible for what. That's the main thing. When people don't let us access or talk to the actual landholder, that's a red flag for us. We want to be able to have a discussion if you don't have a formal agreement with the landholder to ensure that they know this is occurring and that it is legitimate. It all comes back to evidence, and we want to make sure if there are two landholders operating on one spot, who's responsible for what. If you've got a lease in place and it says that the owner is responsible for all roads and fences, well, you can't then claim it as the leasing. But we want to have that discussion and just see that. But there's no problem. We've done thousands with that arrangement. It's just provide the evidence and have the conversation with us and say, I'm responsible for this, they're responsible for that. We've both got claims in. They're claiming this, I'm claiming this. And we'll draw all that and put it all together in our system. But we just have, if people are open and transparent, it makes it a lot easier.
Mine's a bit of a, you know, kind of interesting scenario. So I've got a farmer who very quickly jumped on and put in their $25,000 application for the flood. They didn't apply for the tropical cyclone because they said, you know, there's costing for both, but, you know, they knew that the costing for, or the expenses for the flood would be more than what the cyclone had been. If it does go to category D, they probably shot themselves in the foot a little bit because they're going to have only been able to apply once. Is that right? Or is it, because if category D goes to say 100, will they be able to apply for both?
No, so it is one application. However, they don't need to be concerned because whichever event it is raised to, they will be eligible for the event if they're in an LGA, and we'll move them into the best option, if that makes sense.
Yep, excellent.
But we will take care of that because you shouldn't be penalised for not knowing what was ahead of you, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll work to manage that. That's fine.
Just a quick question. You're saying a few day turnaround. If there's farmers that applied within 24 hours of the grant opening and haven't heard anything, should they be reaching out then? Because I've got a few that, I know have applied and haven't heard anything in the last sort of, 10 days since it's been open.
We have about 500 that have applied. So we're working through them, and like I said, we do them in order. And as we establish a completed application, we'll then reach out and discuss. So they would have received a response saying, "We've received your application, it'll be processed." So as soon as we get to it, they'll start getting comms straight away. It'll either be we're missing this information, which you may have seen a few of the farmers have probably received emails already going, there's some information missing, we need this to continue with their application. And the ones that are complete, our assessment officers are processing straight away. So it's just that. And as the load, obviously a lot have come in all at once, as with all these events like the previous ones, it does create a very steep mountain that we start climbing. But yeah, that's how it works. So it's really those completed applications are key.
Thank you.
Just a question regarding the compounding effect of the flood versus the cyclone. Unfortunately, the cyclone probably cast the die that led to more sustained and substantial damage with the flooding. It's a bit complex, I guess, in looking at what was sort of sustained back in the cyclone event, which was probably more production and pasture challenge and the whole lot. So we would be behind the 8 ball from the cyclone, whereas more the physical more the physical damage fell out with the flooding. So how do you? It's sort of like a cross pollination between two events, even though the die was cast by the first one. So I guess the challenge is for us that we may not necessarily have the evidence that you guys are probably looking for from the cyclone event, but obviously with more physical stuff falling out of the flood, it's more graphic. How do we address that? Because I think there's a lot of us that are thinking, well, if we apply for the first one, the cyclone event, and yet we probably don't have the evidence and the photographic evidence to back that up as compared to the flooding event. Do we forfeit, potentially benefit from being reimbursed for costs for the first one, and then just have to sort of wear that in sort of considering the flood event? There's a bit of an overlap here. It's probably unprecedented, and I think it's probably confusing and frustrating and tripping a lot of fellas up as to which one they apply for, and probably backs up that previous comment of going for the flood event, but then shooting yourself in the foot that you probably could sort of get some assistance from when it actually started, is where I'm coming from.
So Rod, from what I'm hearing, my first response to that would be pick the one that you've got the evidence for, because that will be the one that gets up. And I know that's the simple answer, but if what you're saying is, and what I'm hearing is, you've got evidence of more damage from the flooding event, you should be able to easily evidence your 25,000. And because it started later, you have longer to claim. So you may not have it ready to go right now, but you've got that extra little window in time as claimable dates. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. As I say, we're not all running around with cameras when we need them, I can tell you that.
Yeah, look, you know, it is tricky because it's a combined event and because of the time between the two events, but it, you know, it is what it is, and that's how the decision was made. So I think you just look at, you know, and it's going to be on a farmer by farmer basis. Look at what you do have, what can get up, and we'll work with you to get the best option over the line.
Right, fair call.
We might just jump to Andrew Mulligan and then just talk about general recovery activities. And then if there's still time at the end, because it's been a good discussion. So if there's still time at the end, we'll come back. Carlie, if that's okay, we can come back and have more questions. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And yeah, that has raised a lot of questions, and thanks for clearing that up. I'd just like to introduce Andrew Mulligan as Director of Local Land Services and is leading the Agricultural Recovery Subcommittee. I'll let Andrew talk about the process, but he's just going to talk about what's happening from a Reconstruction Authority perspective in terms of how does that work. What's the role of the recovery committees and subcommittees and what we might expect from those in the next a little while. So, Andrew, thanks for coming on, and I'll hand over to you to give us a bit of an update.
No worries. Thanks so much, Ken. And as Ken pointed out, I'm the Local Land Services Recovery Coordinator for this flood event, and working closely with Reconstruction Authority and the industries that have been impacted around in the recovery space. So I'm also the chair of the ASFA Recovery Subcommittee, and that has been stood up in regards to support for industry, primary industries, in regards to the flood event that's just occurred. The ASFA Recovery Subcommittee meets fortnightly, and we have on that subcommittee industry representation from across all of those primary industries: the dairy industry, beef industry, aquaculture, oysters, forestry, horticulture, all of Hunter Local Land Services representation and North Coast Local Land Service representation. And this committee comes together to, number one, talk about the extended impacts and the ongoing impacts that are occurring in those industries, and we're able to report those through to the recovery committees, both the Mid-Coast Recovery Committee and the Hunter Recovery Committee. And all of that information is relayed to those recovery committees so that we can look at support, ongoing support in the recovery space that's going to be needed for primary industries. At the moment, the ASFA Recovery Subcommittee, as I said, reports weekly to the Hunter Recovery Committee and also the Mid-Coast Recovery Committee. They're all coordinated by Dave Owens, who has been appointed the recovery coordinator. And we work closely with Reconstruction Authority in that structure to provide information and in particular impact assessments to those recovery committees and to Reconstruction Authority. We have had one meeting as the ASFA subcommittee, and we've had the opportunity to recognise all of the impacts that have come in from those industries. And I know for a fact that the dairy industry has been heavily impacted, and we've certainly been looking at passing that information on to those to the Reconstruction Authority, and also passing on any of those emerging issues or impacts that are occurring sort of quite urgently and need to be dealt with, passing them on to Dave Owens, the recovery coordinator, as well. So I've been getting quite a bit of feedback from Dave in regards to the way that he's been engaging with the dairy industry as well in particular. And I know that he sees it as an important industry to provide support to. With the ASFA subcommittee as well, we're working closely on industry packages aside from what's being sort of worked on with Reconstruction Authority and RAA, we're looking at industry-specific packages that will support those primary industries into the mid-term to long-term recovery. And that includes feedback from those industries around what is going to be required for that longer-term recovery. So the subcommittee is working really hard on engaging with those industries and getting an idea of what's going to be required mid-term to longer term in that recovery space. So that's a major piece of work that's happening with the ASFA Recovery Subcommittee as well. We're really happy to hear from the dairy industry. We've got great representation from Ken and others. And if there's any other feedback that the dairy industry would like to provide to the ASFA subcommittee, please send that through Ken. It's a really good conduit to be able to provide that feedback around what's happening out on the ground. It's really important to gain an understanding of the damage that's out there, and we do have the PINDA reporting process for damage assessment. So it's been really heartening to see the feedback coming from the dairy industry. We've had a lot of reports into PINDA from the dairy industry, and we want to continue to see that come in so that we get a really good picture of what's happening out there, and we can sort of back the packages that we're putting together for the industry. So that's about it from me, Ken, but I'm happy to take any questions in regards to the recovery subcommittee, the primary industries recovery subcommittee, and in particular from the dairy group.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Just on the PINDA, I know when we go through categories, Category C, and there's talk about whether or not we would qualify for Category D. How important is the PINDA survey data in building a case for maybe going for Category D?
Yeah, look, it's really important that we get as much information as possible to put into the application for Category D, but also for the industry packages that we're looking at for the industries as well. So, yeah, I can't sort of stress how important it is. And if any of the landholders on this meeting need support with that PINDA data, please reach out to Local Land Services. We've got the staff and the opportunity to support people with submitting that PINDA impact assessment information.
Ken, Andrew Ellam here. Andrew, thank you very much as well. I'd like to pass a bit of feedback from one of the clients on how important the industry packages are to the industry, particularly dairies and oysters that I deal with. I had a comment from a farmer that the resilience component of that work last time has made a dramatic difference to their business in the amount of damage they have received this time. Now, they're probably not on the lower Delta river that was probably a lot of farms were 100% submerged. But certainly in terms of runoff and wash off from the storm damage. So I just wanted to say that farmers do appreciate that, and the resilience work that we have put in there has been really a great thing, although it probably doesn't come out as much. When we look at fence as well, just as an input key to that, because we seem to pull those fences over every time, and that might be an answer now that that's becoming more available to us. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
We'll open questions up for both Andrew and Carlie and Carlie's team. If anyone has any. Yes.
Yeah, just a question, I guess for Andrew. You know, as we've been talking to farmers, we've quite often been asking for consent to share with other agencies in response. I know we've supported, and a number of people have supported, completion of PINDA. Is there something equivalent within that process that will allow us, that you'll be able to generate a report for us? Obviously, we're directing people there to provide that impact and feedback. I'm just wondering whether there's now a data source there that would be of value in terms as we're trying to mount other, recovery activity to get that data back out of PINDA. You're on mute, Andrew.
The platform, the PINDA platform and reporting system is live and open. So if you log on, you can actually see the data in regards to the reporting that's come in. The one thing that we are unable to do, it's all de-identified. So it's down to a local government area rather than sort of specific farms, that type of thing. So there is an opportunity to log in, and I can also check out whether there's going to be an opportunity to share when we can share the damage impact assessment data as well. So I can follow that one up. But there is an opportunity to log on to the PINDA site and have a look at some of that stuff for yourself.
I might see if Andrew, if it's possible for us to do a dairy category. I know it's by LGA currently on the site, but I might talk to Karen and see what, because a big de-identified and there's 60 in there at the moment, so it's impossible to determining the individuals. So I might see if that is possible. Any other questions? I've just got a question for Carlie. If you, let's say, for example, your damage was to the dairy, but you've repaired the dairy, so you don't have photos of the damage to the dairy that you're claiming the repairs for. Are other photos suitable that might show some other damage? How specific does the photo evidence need to be of what you're claiming?
So in a way, Ken, they're two separate requirements. We need evidence that damage has been incurred on your property on the date to make you eligible. But then as long as your claims fall under the evidence requirements, they don't have to match. So we might ask for additional evidence. If, as Jared used the example before, I've lost X amount of fencing, that's a legitimate thing that you'd be able to demonstrate. In assessing that, the team might ask for a photo of, the said topping fence. So, but you don't have to, in terms of eligibility, you don't have to line up and plan what you're going to have incurred costs for, if that makes sense. They're two separate evidence requirements.
Thank you.
Carlie, would that also, some of that evidence be the invoice itself from the service provider? I'd suggest that that's just as good of evidence as the photos.
Absolutely. So the photo evidence is the initial hurdle that you need for eligibility, but actually from the when you're claiming the surplus to the initial 5, but you also have to validate the initial 5 if you go beyond 5, it is that invoice of it's proof of payment of damage incurred and repairs.
And just another quick one, the rural landholder grant is no upfront payment. Fair? Is that true to say?
That is correct.
Spend and then claim back.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Been some great discussion. Thanks, Carlie and team, for your presentation. Thanks, Andrew, for coming on, giving us an update in the recovery space. And the recovery space is ongoing. So that will evolve over time. And I just want to point out the PINDA email address, or not email address, web address was in the chat. The other thing we'll drop into the chat is the dairy unit in the DPI RD, our website. We've got a lot of good resources, flood resources, that can help, particularly in the recovery space. So encourage people to go visit that site and have a look through those resources, and for service providers online, you might be able to sort of pick out parts of data and information on that site that could be useful when you're engaging with impacted farmers. And Carlie's dropped in the RAA website as well into the chat. Zita, have I missed anything?
No, I think that's all. Thanks, Ken.
Great. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. And apart from all of the impact that's happened to farmers, I know there's a lot of service providers online as well, and we certainly do appreciate the effort you're doing and working with farmers in supporting them through this event as well. So thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.